recently see a UFO?
Well, I was in New York in an apartment, and I was just standing by the roof, and I looked left, and there was this thing about 100 yards away. I could have hit it with a stone if I threw it. And I was looking at it and thinking, what is it? What is it? You know, is it a helicopter? No, it's making no noise. Is it a balloon? And you know, one part of me all the time was saying, that's a UFO, you know.
Good evening. Tonight we go after a fantastic story. The story that flying saucers from other worlds are visiting our planet, just as we are exploring outer space with our own rocket satellites. Our guest is former Marine Air Corps Major Donald Kehoe, who has the support of scores of prominent businessmen, military men, and some scientists in his campaign to prove that flying saucers exist. If you're curious to know why Major Kehoe charges that the United States Air Force is deliberately deluding us when it calls saucer stories the bunk, if you want to hear his own evidence that the saucers are real, and his reaction to the claim of two Americans who say they've spoken with men from Venus, we'll go after those stories in just a moment. As head of this private group interested in flying saucers, he's repeatedly attacked the United States Air Force and others for claiming that flying saucers are apparently flights of fancy and not flights by Martians or men from the moon. Independent surveys show that millions of Americans do share his belief in these celestial saucers. Major Kehoe, first of all, let me ask you this. Most people in the United States, in spite of the fact that I say that millions do believe, I think you will agree that most people in the United States don't believe in flying saucers from outer space. They probably hold the view of columnist Bob Considine, who wrote that flying saucers are products of, for the most part, quote, pranksters, half-wits, cranks, publicity hounds, fanatics in general, and screwballs, end quote. How do you feel about Mr. Considine's charge?
Well, I know where he got the story. He got it from Colonel Watson out at the Air Technical Intelligence Center in Dayton. In fact, the colonel went even a little farther, and he said behind every sighting was an idiot, a crackpot, a religious fanatic. That included a lot of high-ranking Air Force pilots, incidentally, and many airline captains, people who were qualified to see these things. But he's just following out an Air Force policy.
Well, now, you're not suggesting that Bob Considine is in the pay of the Air Force. He's an independent newsman with a considerable reputation.
I mean the colonel. No, I have every respect for Bob Considine.
In spite of the fact that he suggests that pranksters, half-wits, and screwballs are responsible for the stories about flying saucers.
Well, I wish I could show him any time a list of about 800 witnesses, some of the big names in aviation, including up to the rank of colonel in the Air Force. They're still flying, and they're still carrying passengers. They've never been grounded. They're still guiding airliners in, the radar men are, night after night in bad weather. If they're screwballs and incompetents, why are they still on the job?
The airplane is flying approximately Mach 0.82, approximately, about 470 knots ground speed, or true, I should say, true. And the object descends to his altitude from above and does a very high-speed turn and then goes away towards Canada, in the direction of Canada, leaving a wavy smoke trail behind it. I met the captain in San Francisco Airport and took some equipment along, and we recreated that event with the aircraft on the ground, of course. And I had him sit exactly where he sat. I had him take a grease pencil and mark up some plastic that we put over the windows. And in doing all that, we were able to reconstruct the flight path of the object relative to the airplane. Now, why can we do that? Because the autopilot was on at all times maintaining straight and level flight, so that the motions of the UFO were relative to the cockpit outline, the windows, for instance. Well, what did we find? We found that the UFO, whatever it was, approached at approximately 1,000 miles an hour. It did a very high-speed turn, approximately 20 Gs at least, and then went away from the aircraft at about 1,000 miles an hour in a climb. Well, we don't know of any other aircraft that can do that and end up looking like an oblate spheroid.
to 3 o'clock. Get some strokes out there. Can you tell us what it is?
I'll tell you what, that's some, right now, I don't know what it is right now. There is a restricted area that's used by the military out here in the daytime.
Yeah, it's pretty odd.
Hold on, let me see if anybody else knows around here.
Albuquerque, Center America 1359 at 310, we get light shot. 564, can you paint that object at all?
Talking to the 3 or 4 guys around here, no one knows what that is. We've never heard about that.
But nobody's painting it at all? That object that's up in the air?
It's up in the air? What's the altitude about?
I don't know, probably right around 30,000 or so, and it's a drill that starts going counterclockwise, and the length is unbelievable.
Cannon 21.
Cannon, go ahead.
Hey, do you guys know if there was anything like a tethered balloon or anything released that should be above high band?
No, we haven't heard nothing about it.
Okay. Guy at 39,000 says he's seen something at 30,000 that the length is unbelievable and it has a strobe on it. This is not good.
What does that mean?
I don't know. It's a UFO.
It was interesting to find out what parts of the interview were deleted, which to me show that those are the parts that people should not know. Big Brother doesn't want that people know about space and real findings in space. This Moscow conference was opened by General Popovich, a cosmonaut, and Dr. Ashasa was the chairman, and I did not know at that time that he was also chief of Navy intelligence of the Soviet Union. This standard gives UFO conferences to general public, which was incredible in my mind. At the end...
So this was open to the general public in
Yes.
Moscow as well?
Yes, but we were only 4 from the West. They were all over from the Soviet Union at that time. And those from the West, there was an American general, Army's intelligence chief, can you imagine? And his...
Can you name him?
Yes, General Albert Stubblebine. And his now wife, psychiatrist Rima Leibov, and Victoria, who was a journalist and now married to Colonel John Alexander, who is very, very knowledgeable about space, UFOs, and mind control. And at the end of the conference, I was asked if I would like to see something very specific, and I couldn't understand what. I said, sure, what do you want to show me? And they took me to the cellar of this institute. And it was behind so thick iron doors, several of them, 3, 4, I recall, and I thought, what is this? This is like going to a secret vault of the bank. And there was a huge hall full of UFO pictures from all the walls, in all the walls, and then a huge map of the Soviet Union with pins. And I stopped immediately and said, what are these? They ignored my question. I thought that they could have been landing sites of UFOs. But anyway, what they specifically wanted me to see was a story of Anatoly Malchev. And I was so surprised because I have lectured of Anatoly Malchev in my previous lectures, because this happened to him in 75.
So who is she exactly?
Well, he was a woodworker in the woods, and all of a sudden a UFO landed next to him. And humanoids came out and asked him for a ride, to come along. And he was courageous, and he went along. And then they were flying for some time, and they passed the moon. And on the other side of the moon, the dark side so-called, of the moon, he saw lights. And he asked, what are these? So he was told there are bases on the dark side of the moon. And then they flew maybe 2 hours or something, and they landed on a planet. And when he got out, he got a shock of his life, because the people who came to greet him and meet him were his dead relatives and friends. who were in perfect shape and beautiful and, you know, in perfect health. And this was deleted.